Hey guys. All right, I'm gonna share the screen with y'all. Um, okay, so what we're gonna do today, real quick, is we got 3 slides. We're gonna finish up this chapter. Like I said the other day, we're moving very quickly. We already talked about that. So we're gonna finish up this chapter, and then you're gonna work on some questions using the textbook. Since we're going over everything very quickly and not as in much detail, the questions that y'all will answer will be more detailed. So you got to use the book for that. So make sure y'all have y'all's textbook. Answer these questions when y'all do them on regular notebook paper, and then bring them back to class on Thursday. Okay. Okay. So the other day we talked about George Washington becoming president. The French Revolution happening and all that stuff. And like I said, we're not in the past. I've gone a lot of detail about what happened during with the country regarding Washington's presidency and all that. But once again, we're not really diving into that. So just gonna go over a few things. Okay, so George Washington is going to serve 2 terms. He was elected, obviously, once he did the presidential election of '89, and he'll run again and win basically unanimously again. People wanted him to become a king, basically. They wanted him to become president until he was dead. But like I mentioned the other day in class, he wanted to show that you can have a peaceful transition of leaders without it being through warfare or just through death. And so this was all symbolic, trying to show the world there's a peaceful way to change leaders and wanted the American people to decide who the next leader was going to be. So he served 2 terms. And because of that, it set a precedent in the future for other presidents to do the same thing. Okay. So in 1796, he decided to retire and go back to Mount Vernon. He was going to go back to farming, once again, go back to be home with Martha, and he will die just a few years, a few years later after this. And one part of this lecture, I was going to do a virtual tour of Mount Vernon. I will do that next time I come back. So when I see y'all on Thursday, I'll do that. Remind me to do the virtual tour of Mount Vernon, just show y'all some of the different rooms and so forth, and we'll go over that. Okay, so that's what we want to do. He served his time. He did 2 terms as president. A lot of things were happening regarding France and England during that time period. He had to kind of save the country through the Whiskey Rebellion a little bit. Trying to create a country, taxes and all that stuff. And so he was just a tired guy and just wanted to go home. Now, they did not do TV and all that stuff, obviously, back then. So his farewell address, he wrote it, and they published it in newspapers and such. In his farewell address, he just thanked the country for giving him the opportunity to become the president, the leader. But he warned Americans of 3 things, and we talked about this in class the other day, in order to succeed. And make sure you know what those 3 things are. Okay, so if you want to make a list, 1, 2, and 3, we're going to go over those in just a second. Okay, so he warned Americans, if you want to succeed as a country, you got to make sure of 3 things. Number 1, do not have allies. Do not become allies with other countries, because if you're an ally with another country and that country goes to war, then it's your job to help them, right, and defend them. And so what he said is, if you're allies with other countries, it brings you into wars that you don't need to be in. And we all know over the last however many years, we've kind of much been the world police, helping everybody that needs our help. And so we kind of failed at that. Right. The other thing he said is not to be in debt. So once you get in debt, it's hard to get out of debt, and we've pretty much been in debt our entire existence. And the third thing he said was to not have political parties. He said political parties, as he saw in England, had already kind of divided the country. He said that the political parties, if they were formed, they would divide the country into 2. And like I said the other day, we're divided now through political parties, right? So we're very much divided in Democratic and Republican, almost as much as the country was divided back in 1861 with the Civil War. So between the North and the South, and Democrats and Republicans back then. So once again, those are the 3 things. Don't have allies, do not get into debt, and do not have political parties. And the minute he left office, those things are already forming up. Political parties are already forming about people wanting strong central government and weak central government, different beliefs about different ways government should be held. And because of that, political parties kind of emerged from that period. Okay, so those are the 3 things. So Washington served 2 terms, setting a precedent for that. decided to retire to go back home. He will die a few years later. And then, and speaking of his death, there's in his bedroom, which you see when you go to Mount Vernon. Once he passed away, Martha never slept in that room again. She slept in a different bedroom, but she could not, stand the thought of sleeping in the same room that her husband passed away in. So that's just kind of a cool thing. That's the virtual tour. We'll do that when I get back, so don't forget to remind me. All right, get through all this. And there we go. Okay, so real quick, we're going to go through the elections of 1796 and the elections of 1800. 1796 is when John Adams is going to be elected as our second president of the United States, and then 1800, Thomas Jefferson will be elected president. So we're going to talk about this real briefly. Not going to talk about anything that happened during John Adams' presidency. There's a few things going on between the French and him, but not really anything to really talk about. So in 1796, John Adams, who was a member of the New Federalist Party, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists we talked about regarding the Constitution. The Federalists wanted a strong central government. They thought the Constitution was fine. The Anti-Federalists thought that it gave too much power to the government. They wanted a Bill of Rights added and all that kind of stuff. So the Federalist Party are people that supported a strong central and federal government. Thomas Jefferson ran against John Adams. He was a Democratic Republican, which is basically people that supported weaker government, more state government, and things like that. Okay. So John Adams is going to win. It's not going to be by a landslide or anything, but he's going to win the election because he wins some of the bigger populated states in the Northeast. And so that's just the way it works out. Now, in 1800, not really much happened during John Adams' presidency. He's going to run again. But there's going to be some different people that's going to be there as well. Aaron Burr. Now today, for example, if you're a Republican, we only have one Republican candidate. Back then, you could have as many candidates from these parties as you wanted to. So there were two from the same party, and there were two from the Federalist Party. So there were two, Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson from the Democratic Republican Party, and then John Adams, and I can't remember the other person that ran for the Federalist Party. So those four guys ran. So because of those four guys running, it's nobody really, claimed a huge margin of victory. And so Jefferson came in first, or Jefferson and Aaron Burr tied. And so it went down to the House of, when that happens, it goes down to the House of Representatives to vote. So if there's a tie or there's not a clear winner, like today, if nobody gets to the 270, no matter who's winning, it goes to the House of Representatives. And you would think that they would vote on, once again, who the winner of the popular vote was. What they did when they went to the House is they voted 36 times. So they went through every member of the House of Representatives and said, all right, who do you want, Jefferson or Aaron Burr? And they would tie. And then they would do it again, and they would tie. And then they would do it again, and then there was a tie. And they would do it again, and there's a tie. And then they would do it again, and there's a tie. And they did it 36 times, okay? Finally, on the 36th time of voting, somebody changed their vote, and they voted on Jefferson to defeat Aaron Burr as president. So Aaron Burr becomes the vice president. Thomas Jefferson will be elected as the third president of the United States. Now, at that time, we mentioned this before with with George Washington and John Adams. The second place winner became the vice president. After this election, they will change that with the 12th Amendment in 1804, which is whenever the Louisiana Purchase will happen as well. The second place winner will no longer become the vice president. You will have a running mate whenever you run for presidency. So you already know who your president will be if you happen to win. Okay. So John Adams is the second president of the United States. He serves one term under the Federalist Party. And then Thomas Jefferson will win the third election, and he will serve a couple terms. So we'll talk more about his second term later on. All right. So he defers Aaron Burr. We all know Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr will kill Alexander Hamilton in a duel, and in New Jersey when the dueling was actually illegal in that state at that point in time, but it happened anyway. And y'all all know pretty much the history of that. All right, so real quick, let's go over the Louisiana Purchase and a little bit of the Lewis and Clark expedition, and then this will end chapter 7. We'll answer some questions. Just make sure you answer the questions in complete sentences on notebook paper, and use your textbook because there's a lot more detail than what we went over in class, just because I'm going over the Cliff Notes version of all this stuff. And so make sure you answer that on a separate sheet of paper from the questions, and then bring those with you on Thursday. All right. So as you can see here, that light color is the Louisiana Territory. So those of you that aren't really familiar with this, Louisiana used to be that entire section that you see there in that light tan color. Okay, so we're gonna talk about why we bought it, what we paid for it, and then what happened after we bought it. All right, so in 1803, Thomas Jefferson basically, let me move this so you can see that. That says expedition, by the way, Lewis Clark expedition. And then right here, 1803, Jefferson bought Louisiana from France for $15 million, which doubles the size of the United States overnight. Okay, all right, so basically, Spain had control over that region for a long time, and then they gave it to France. France pretty much wanted it. France, Napoleon had kind of dreamed of having an empire in North America. There were some of the islands over there around Cuba that the French had control of, and they were planning on eventually using that as kind of a home base, and then launching this big empire in North America. But what happened is there's a big slave rebellion on those islands, and the French really didn't have control of that region anymore. But what was happening was Napoleon needed money. He's at war with England. It's taking a lot of money. He needs money to continue his growing of his empire, and he's losing money. He realizes that his dreams of having an empire in North America are slowly fading away. And so Thomas Jefferson is worried that eventually, if France doesn't have control over Louisiana anymore, at one point that another country may stop us from using New Orleans. And New Orleans was a big, trading area for us to use for the Gulf of Mexico. And so Thomas Jefferson sent some people down to France to talk to Napoleon about purchasing New Orleans. Okay, so it's like you when you go into to Walmart or Walgreens, right? So you go in there to buy toilet paper and you come out with $300 worth of stuff, but things are on sale. All right, Jefferson goes in there. His man offers to pay money for New Orleans, and Napoleon tells his man, you know what? We need money. We don't need this region anymore. Let's offer him the entire Louisiana Territory. So the guy comes back to our man and says, hey, we got a better deal for you. We're not going to sell you just New Orleans. We will sell you the entire Louisiana Territory for $15 million. Okay. Now, look, Thomas Jefferson is a strict constructionist of the Constitution. What that means is he doesn't believe that he believes that if it's not written in the Constitution, then you can't do it. Okay. So there's nowhere in the Constitution that says the president of the United States can purchase land. All right. So he doesn't think that you can actually do it. And he's big on this, but it's too good of a deal that he can't pass up. He's like, look, I know that I don't really think I can do this. He has people that tell him, yes, you can. But it's too good of a deal to pass up. So he purchases it for $15 million. All of a sudden, overnight, the United States is doubled. So as you can see, to the right of the Louisiana Territory is all the territories and the states that existed already. And then now we get all the Louisiana Territory. So within one night, we have doubled the size of the United States. Okay. Now he has no idea what he just bought. All right. He just bought all this land. He couldn't pass it up. He didn't have time to send somebody over there to see what he just got. So he bought it. Now he calls some people over to see what he just bought. All right. And let me click on it. Okay. So in 1804, he gets Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. They are going to basically be the two guys that are going to go find out what Jefferson just bought. Okay. Now Meriwether Lewis was the secretary in the White House, so he was already kind of friends with Thomas Jefferson. He served in the military before all this. He was big into botany and plants and animals and all kind of stuff like that. Very smart person. So Thomas Jefferson asked him. He said, "Look, I just spent $15 million on all this land. I need you to go find out what I just bought." All right. So Lewis gets a friend of his that he met in the military, named William Clark, who is going to go with him. They get a group of people. It's about 30 guys in total, called the Corps of Discovery. It's just a bunch of guys that are just kind of people that like to go on these adventures, and they're going to leave St. Louis, Missouri, and they're going to go west to see what Thomas Jefferson just purchased. All right. So they're going to go on an expedition west to see what Jefferson had just bought. One of the main things they were looking for is to see if a Northwest Passage existed. We talked about this back with the other stuff a long time ago with exploration. Supposedly there was a water route that cut all the way across the United States or North America, and they wanted to see if that existed. And so they were going to do that. Okay, so what they did is basically they got all their things together. They're going to leave around St. Louis, Missouri. They're going to go west along the Missouri River. So they're going to sail. The bad thing is, if you don't know anything about geography, all the rivers to the east of the Mississippi River flow west into the Mississippi River, and all the rivers from the west flow to the east, and then everything flows down the Mississippi River and dumps out into the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so the Missouri River actually flows the opposite direction that they're going, so they can't just like sail by wind and all that kind of stuff. So they actually have about 3 boats. A couple of them are flatbed boats, and then one of them is just like a little keel boat. And they're going to have to pull it. They're going to have to get in the water, and they're going to be pulling this thing upstream. So they're going to be moving very slowly. And so they're going to do that. And it's going to take them about 2 years to do this. Okay. Now, while they're going northwest around North Dakota, they're going to go to a place called Fort Mandan, and you're going to do some stuff with this later on in your little assignment that you're going to do, where they basically made a fort for the winter where they're going to be safe and get ready for the big journey west and all that. Well, when they do that, they come across a French fur trapper named Charbonneau. His name is Toussaint Charbonneau. And he's going to be a translator. He's going to help them translate with the Indians, help them get horses later on and things like that. Well, his wife is a Native American named Sacagawea. Sacagawea, when she was a young girl, she was kidnapped by a different Indian tribe. And so she'd been living with that Indian tribe. And then she ended up marrying this French fur trapper. So she's going to be a big part of this trip. So as they're going west, going maybe like 10 to 15 miles a day, going upstream the Missouri River, while the people are pulling the boats, Lewis and Clark are walking really slowly along the land, along the sides of the river, drawing pictures of new plants and animals that they're finding. So there's a lot of new discoveries. There's over 100 new plants they discovered they didn't know about before. They found the grizzly bear for the first time. They found prairie dogs for the first time. So a lot of things that they did not know existed. They came in contact with Native Americans and became friends with some of those tribes. And so it was a pretty big deal. All right. Now, when they made it all the way to the Rocky Mountains, they had to get over the Rocky Mountains. It's a cool little story. When they get over there, they come across some Indians, the Shoshone Indians, and those Indians were not going to let the Lewis and Clark and the Corps Discovery get horses. Sacagawea realized that she recognized the Indian chief of those Indians and realized that that was actually her brother that she was kidnapped from when she was a young girl. They had a big family reunion and everybody was happy. And then the leaders or that Indian chief let them use horses, and they had to go over the Rocky Mountains. And then once they got to the Rocky Mountains, they picked back up on the river. And then they found out that the Columbia River is the one that actually empties out into the Pacific Ocean. The Missouri River stops around the Rocky Mountains, and then the next river is the Columbia. So there's no Northwest Passage. The river stops, and then the Columbia River nearby picks up and empties out into the Pacific Ocean. So they found the fact that there is no actual Northwest Passage based on what they did. Okay. But what they did is they returned in 1806. It's a lot easier now, right? Because they can go downstream instead of going upstream. So they can just get in these boats and just kind of cruise down the river and let the current take them back down to the Mississippi River, where they will then arrive in St. Louis. So it takes a lot less time to get there, get back than it took them to go. Out of the about 30 men, only one person had died, and Lewis and Clark kept journals about everything they did. Sacagawea, like I said, helped them know what kind of plants not to eat that were poisonous, certain kinds of berries and things like that. So she was real good about that. Translation with the Indians and stuff like that. So she was a big help. So they did arrive home with some success. They found a lot of new species of plants and animals. They got in contact with a lot of Native Americans that'll help out later on as far as trade and things like that. And what this did, it inspired the movement west. Okay. They're going to write about it when they get home. They're going to talk about it. People are going to read about the entire trip, and they're going to be like, oh, wow, this is a very cool thing. Maybe I should go west. And y'all have to remember, guys, back then, there was not really much of anything to do for fun. People read books for fun. They played card games, and that's really about it. There was no video games, no music to listen to really, unless you had played an instrument, things like that. So some people just said, you know what, this sounds really adventurous, and I'm gonna go west as well. So basically, this Louisiana Purchase and this Lewis and Clark expedition kind of helped pave the way for movement west, which we'll get to pretty shortly. Talking about the Oregon Trail, people moving out west to go to California, then the gold rush and all that. So that's where we're kind of building up is the movement out west, and obviously we're going to get control over all that land eventually later on. Now, just a little bit about Lewis and Clark when they got done with their adventures and then became very famous. Lewis, the main guy, became the new governor of the entire Louisiana territory, but he had dealt with a lot of depression in his life and couldn't really deal with that. So supposedly he committed suicide in a saloon one night, and so that's what happened to him. Clark ended up adopting Sacagawea's baby. Sacagawea ended up passing away later, not too far after this trip, maybe a couple years later on, and he will basically raise their baby. Their baby's name was Sacagawea's baby's name with her French fur trapper husband was named Jean Baptiste. And so the French fur trapper supposedly just went missing. Nobody ever heard from him again. Nobody knows what happened to him. And then Sacagawea passes away, and then Clark will help raise this baby and send him off to college, make sure that he's schooled and all that kind of stuff. So that's just a little bit about their post expedition life. Okay. Okay, so here's real quick. Here's a picture showing you their movement west. They go from St. Louis all the way out west. So they're going upstream all the way up the Missouri River. Once again, it's very hard to do. You have to pull the boats. And those are the different Indian tribes that you see. Fort Mandan, which is in North Dakota. That's where they met Sacagawea. Sacagawea would join the trip with her French fur trapper husband. When they get up here to the top, you can see there's two different red lines where the Great Falls are. They basically split their group into two because they didn't know the river splits off. They didn't know which way to go. Eventually they meet back up, and then they go out west where the Columbia River is and go all the way to the west. Okay, so in reality, they went farther west than they probably should have because they did not control that land. That was not under the jurisdiction of the United States anymore, but they didn't really care. They kept going to see how far west they could actually go. Okay, so that's what a map of the United States looks like during that time period. And here's just a picture to show you Lewis and Clark. Lewis is on the left, Clark was on the right. Once again, they were good buddies, and Lewis will hire Clark to go on that expedition. And here's just a picture to show you what the boats kind of look like. So they had to push with those. The river was very shallow. There were a lot of sticks and logs in the way. They had a lot of issues, a lot of problems, but the Corps of Discovery were very, they knew what they were doing. They were veterans at this kind of stuff. They were experienced, and so they were able to go all the way back, or all the way west and back in just 2 years with only losing one person. And that's about 8,000 miles that they traveled. So 8,000 miles going west, that's a long trip, right? To only lose one person. So that's pretty cool. All right. Once again, here's another picture. There's a picture of the Rocky Mountains they had to cross to get over. They had to cross that by obviously by walking. And so they had to do that. And so they had to get horses to do that. And that's when Sacagawea met her long lost brother and all that kind of stuff. And here's some of the canoes that they showing you them coming across some Native Americans, and talking to them. So once again, a pretty cool topic. When we talk about the Lewis and Clark expedition, and we're going to do an assignment on that next time I see y'all. So bring y'all's computers next time. All right. Okay, that's pretty much it for chapter 7. And if you have any questions, let me know. See y'all next time.